In the late afternoon, Jacob and I found ourselves in the study. Golden sunlight now flooded the room through the side window. Snowy dust shimmered in the rays. A kaleidoscope of stars was projected off of the reflective artifacts in the room. It was gorgeous. Probably. At the time, it was a pain in my ass. Jacob and I had to finish documenting the installation. The sun's brilliant light glared into our stressed and weary eyeballs as we filled out paperwork. Perhaps it was a feature of the study, something to chase the bookish out of their den before supper. Annoyed the hell out of us. I spent a few minutes locating optimal camera positions, but nothing worked. The contrast of light and shadow obscured features of the mounting. I raised my head from the eyepiece and I spoke to Sam. "Hey, Sam, mind if I close the curtains? I gotta get this picture." As disapprovingly as he could manage, Sam nodded slowly. I think. To be honest, I couldn't tell if he was simply acknowledging me or if that was permission. I shot a questioning look at my buddy Jacob, but he wasn't paying attention. He was occupied by some form. Oh well, I didn't hear a no, so as I walked up to the window and gently pulled the curtains together, and hearing no protestation, I walked back to the tripod. Through the eyepiece and between photos, I was able to study the piece. The differences between the painting that I brought back and this one, they weren't immediate. I get why Jacob was so skeptical at first. There was one small spiral in the upper right that gave it away. To me, that was crystal clear. But no FBay agent would have noticed. Between the graininess of the original photo we submitted and the strong standards of incompetence that members of FBay upheld, we could have sat silent on this. I would have had a different life if we had. But Jacob and I are honest people. Plenty of other faults. A lot. A real lot. But honest. After snapping a few shots of the entire painting, I moved in to document the mounting. I swapped the lenses and saddled the tripod close to the wall. As I focused the camera, I noticed that the canvas wrap looked odd. Maybe it was too rounded? I can't say exactly what gave it away. I don't have a clear recollection of what the original wrap looked like. All I remember is that something wasn't right with the wrapping. A mild panic spiraled out of some damned creepy void in my mind. No, not panic. Doom. Well, maybe 80-20 doom to panic. Panic is for those who have energy to fight. And I really needed to go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how that fits into the emotional budget. When I'm exhausted, base urges like that have equal status among my emotions. A quick note here. This is not some retrospective commentary I'm placing on this event. This was a line of thought I'd actually had at the time, while sitting idle over the camera for maybe a minute. Halfway in between a panic attack and a nap, I decided it was a good time to self-reflect on what sub-classification of anxiety I was feeling. Eventually, I found myself back at my camera. Morbid curiosity compelled my eyes to follow the binding up to a corner. Instead of being tucked back tightly and out of view, the fold was sloppily matted down and loose. That, I convinced myself, was undeniably different from the original. The painting I had purchased was wrapped tightly and stapled into cheap wood, something off of an assembly line. I positioned the camera closer to the painting and swapped in a lens with a zoom. But the room suddenly felt stuffy. Feeling eyes on my back, I took in a breath and looked around. My eyes met Sam's and I smiled, nervously. An irrational paranoia emerged, a fear that any wrong move would inform Sam of what was happening. Sam looked away, folded his arms. That calmed me. I took the behavior as a sign that Sam couldn't possibly know what was going on. But Jacob did. Between examinations, I looked up and happened to catch his perplexed face staring at mine. "Beautiful painting, Jacob," I said for absolutely no reason. His face scrunched up and he silently mouthed, "What the hell are you doing?" I turned and bent back over my camera. The corner. This is when I noticed the corner, that sloppy fold. Sticking out of that fold, just barely visible, was another canvas, with rougher threads, darker. Beyond my control, I stood upright and let loose a small chuckle. Jacob looked surprised. I was surprised. Sam was facing the other way. He didn't seem bothered. I walked over to my briefcase as calmly as I could manage and started to scroll a message on one of the forums. I walked over to my friend and asked, "Hey, can you check this for me? This section always confuses me." He just looked at me blankly. "You want me to do what?" he puzzled. "Take the damn paper," I mouthed and held it close to his face. Stubbornly, he snapped it from my hand. Scribbled in capital letters were, "There is something under the goddamned painting. We gotta get rid of Sam. I want to check." His eyes got huge and he glared at me. Yeah, I can never remember that, I said aloud. Can you fill that part in? Jacob shrugged and started writing, which kicked off a silent and frantic multi-minute conversation by paper. To some inexperienced idiots like ourselves, at the time anyway, it seemed like the best way to have a secret discussion. We were pretty stupid back then. When we had finally agreed on the plan, we spun around towards Sam, quickly and in perfect synchronization. This would have looked really suspicious to any onlookers, like, say, Sam, had he been there, because he had left. Time had solved our problem. No time to waste. Hurriedly, I waved Jacob over to the door to the study, motioning him to take a post where Sam had stood. What are we doing? Sam strained, shaking his head. Shut up, J-boy, I soothed. Just 2 minutes. I leaned towards the corner of the painting and squinted my eyes, which really doesn't help you see better, but I always do it. Ever so gently, I pulled back the top layer. Indeed, underneath was another canvas. I rubbed it between my fingers. It was coarse to the touch. There was variation in the thread of the fabric. It had a dark tan threading. Paint residue was present, but had worn off the edges. It was old. Very old. No idea how old. Not at the time, anyways. As I rushed to find an ideal vantage point to record this discovery, I almost tripped over the camera. Before snapping a picture, I checked with Jacob. He was facing out to the hall, hands in pockets. I returned my focus to the camera and took the extra seconds necessary to focus it. No telling how they would turn out until they were developed, though. After a few clicks, I tucked the bottom of the canvas onto the fold. Okay, Jacob, I said. Jacob turned nonchalantly and took a position next to his paperwork. Okay, he hissed. You can go okay yourself, you crazy bastard. Look, let's just finish up here and get out as soon as we can, I snapped back. We diligently scribbled on the remaining forms and organized them into the usual red folder. I gently unscrewed the lens from the camera and placed it on a table. With a grunt, I plucked the camera from the tripod and lowered it snugly into the foam case. They were heavy back then. The rest of the pieces followed. The metal locks on the camera case clacked shut. I looked at my friend. Jacob let out a dramatic nasal exhalation, then bobbed his head towards the front of the building, a signal of where the car was and that I'd be the one packing up. In the meantime, he'd finished with business with the Sweetwaters. I dutifully nodded back. He left the room. The silence was uncharacteristic of Jacob. This had unsettled him. A few minutes had passed, and I'd given the room one last look to make sure that no traces of the installation were present. As I slung the camera case around my shoulder, Sam entered the room, carrying a weathered brown paper bag in hand. What are you doing? He barked. Still shaken, my genius snap judgment response was, What are you doing? To which Sam responded by nervously looking at the bag he was holding, then back at me, then off to the side, then back at me again. Then Sam demanded, Where the hell is your partner? You didn't see him? I questioned. He just left. Looking for you or Sweetwater, I suppose. We need a final signature and then we're off. Sam mouthed a curse and bolted away. It was late in the afternoon when Jacob found me under an awning on the front patio. During that time, I had dozed off. A gentle tap on my shoulder prodded me back into reality. Initially, I was glad to be back. In the dream world, I was left to die in a sweltering desert, although, as memory returned, I wasn't so sure if I was better off awake. Hi, Jacob, I slurred. Hell of a journey, eh? He chuckled and he extended his hand. My Jacob was back. There was a light in his eye and a smile on his lips. Sure is, I agreed. I took his hand and was hoisted out of the chair. Jacob took the camera case and the briefcase and walked over to a very fancy sports car. And still the cheapest car on the lot, save for one junker that stood out. I like to think it was Sam's. I picked up the briefcase and met Jacob by the trunk of the car. Should I pop in and say goodbye? I inquired. Jacob glanced just below my neck and remarked flatly, No. I looked down to see a large patch of my shirt had darkened with sweat. All I could do was laugh. I walked to the passenger door and looked at the villa one last time. The thought of putting distance between myself and the Sweetwaters granted me some welcome relief. I plopped myself into the passenger seat, sweaty, disoriented.